What is up, y'all? Welcome to the Men's Journal Everyday Warrior Live Power Hour. Today, I am joined by Sean. Sean, what's going on, man?
Nothing much. Just another Friday.
Another Friday?
All good.
You just hurt yourself?
No, Tyson just hurt himself. I'm trying to avoid hurting myself later this afternoon when I'm sparring with Satoshi Ishii again.
So that's who he was sparring with last week?
Yeah.
Man, he looked, I'm like, Tyson, how long are you going to do this for, man?
Yeah, he's a monster. And he's such a nice guy. He's really gentle when he spars, but, he's a Olympic, black belt in judo. And so he can throw you from anywhere. So you're just sparring and you're working on the feet and all of a sudden you're looking at the lights. Down you go. So
when's his next fight and who's he fighting?
So he's fighting Croatia in like a week and a half. So next week's his last week. So we'll get a couple more sessions in and then he travels to Croatia and then he's got his fight.
He's fighting the entire country.
Yeah. Exactly.
What league?
I don't know. It's a local pro league there that he's fought multiple times in. So it's pretty good. He's got like 35 pro MMA fights already. So unbelievable. After like 2008, he won the gold medal in judo, and then he went in MMA, and he's done professional boxing and K1. He just does everything. Professional grappling. It's pretty impressive.
And so he's the gold medal.
Gold medal, yes.
Like Olympics.
Olympic gold medal, yes.
That's insane.
Yeah, a heavyweight. So he like beat Teddy Renier, who was like the French champion, who's like renowned. I mean, he's
And so is he taking you guys to Croatia for beating on you guys for that's a trip worth taking, man.
I know, because his other one, it was supposed to be in Serbia. And it got canceled, thank God. So that's where he was supposed to fight, Serbia. So I think Croatia's an upgrade.
I think if I told my wife I was going to Croatia, she'd be like, yeah, no, fuck no.
Yeah.
I'm coming. Like, when are we leaving? Jordan. Your wife would probably do the same.
Yeah.
And we're joined by Dr. Kirk Parsley as well. What's going on, man? Okay. All right. Well, I know you're passionate about this subject, and you're good friends with Dr. Chris Frueh, who we have as well, and we're joining right now. Dr. Chris Frueh, are you joining us from Hawaii?
No, I'm actually at my mom's house in Missouri.
In Missouri. Okay. Usually you hail from Hawaii. Chris, before we get your background, and I'm going to open up here with something I just want to bring up, but we also have John Welbourn joining us, but clearly John Welbourn's not here. I guess when you're an NFL athlete, you can just
whenever you want.
Yeah, I guess that's how it works. Yeah. Divas.
Unbelievable.
We'll roast him when he gets here. First off, Dr. Chris Frueh is a good friend of mine. He is renowned in the mental health space. Chris has dedicated his life to helping countless veterans sort of rehab mentally from the war. I am one of those veterans. And without him, I would quite frankly, not be here today. And Chris was at my wedding because he's close to me. And when veterans are struggling, the first person I reach out to is Dr. Chris Frueh, widely published and actually coined the term operator syndrome, which is with regards to special operations soldiers. But a lot of the things we're going to talk about today impact any high performer in any industry where their testosterone's plummeting, cortisol is rising, and mental health issues are coming to the forefront. But here's what I want to say. And I just got back from Washington, D.C., where we were supporting that Others May Live Foundation, which is a foundation for the Air Force rescue community, Air Force PJs, helicopter pilots, pretty much the guys that go in and get people out of behind enemy lines or rescue them from austere conditions. But, met with some buddies in D.C. We recently lost Mike Day 2 weeks ago. Mike Day was on your birthday? No kidding. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that. Mike Day wrote a book called Perfectly Wounded. He was shot 27 times. He was awarded the Navy Cross. The guy was a legend within the SEAL community. And you can't say he wasn't tough to recover from 27 shots. I've heard a lot of people talk about mental health and suicide.
Totally normal,
oh, yeah.
Physically fit.
He was actually in great shape.
Yeah.
Even after retirement, he was in great shape.
And he had every bullet wound tattooed with a
Yes.
bullet tattoo.
He was definitely a character. We got that fixed.
All right. Hopefully you all heard anything.
We did. So, one of the things I heard somebody recently say about taking your own life is that it's weak. And these guys weren't weak. And mental health doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. To bring it home even further, the 75th Ranger community lost a guy actually from Dripping Springs. Did you know about this one?
No.
Which is close to us. So Joseph Kapacheski lost his leg in 2005, I think, to a grenade, rehabbed, came back, and operated as a 75th Ranger Regiment operator for several more deployments. They wrote a book about it. The guy is a legend within the Ranger community. And then post-retirement, recently took his life in late January of this year. So again, these are guys who, fought back from losing a leg, but ultimately lost the war to invisible wounds, which is mental health.
They lose hope. I mean, you lose the community, they lose purpose, they get down and depressed, their marriage goes bad, they lose hope. And when there's no hope, what's the purpose anymore? Why are you here? If you can't hope for anything in the future, why are you here? It's hard to talk people out of that.
Well, the thing
I've
is,
had that call many times.
You can't talk somebody out of it if they're not reaching out. And that's the biggest thing. I think I want to come. We're going to talk about mental health, the history of it, the stats, the data. Dr. We're just calling him Chris from now on. Chris's opinions, the data he's seen, again, being decades in the industry, assessing mental health. But we can't help you if you don't reach out. And again, 988 is a number you can call if you're having suicidal thoughts or tendencies. You've got to reach out for help. And I know, again, this demographic of special operations soldiers applies to anyone in the public sector because you're all humans at the end of the day. Chris, I'd love to start off with you and talk about the history of mental health from a standpoint of, what you've seen in the data over the last, 50, 60, 70 years.
So that's a complicated topic, history. I mean, if we want to go back to the roots of our awareness of the importance of psychiatric functioning, psychological functioning, we could go back to 1880 and Sigmund Freud. We could go back to the U.S. Civil War when the Union Army, active duty Army, during the course of the war, through every month of the war, tracked suicides, homicides, alcoholism, what they called nostalgia, which when you read the description of it, it sounds very, very close to depression. And of course, we can even go back to the ancients. I mean, Shakespeare and then back to the ancients wrote about suicide and melancholia and hopelessness. So let's bring it up to the 20th century. Just a few milestone developments. We were doing lobotomies in the 40s and 50s. We developed ECT in the 50s. Early antipsychotic, antidepressant medications came along in the 50s. Prozac came along in 1987, and that was a game changer. The only reason I know it's 1987 is that's the year I started graduate school. So I started graduate school. We didn't have SSRIs, and then we did. So, welcome to the new epoch.
And SSRIs?
Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Chris, you want to tell people what the ECT stands for too?
Oh, I'm sorry. ECT is electroconvulsive shock therapy. And so we had some pretty blunt instruments up until about 1987 on the medical side, the biological side of treatment. And of course, we had psychotherapy going back to the 1880s. Freud was a physician who discovered that many of his patients benefited not from medical procedures or medications, but just from talking about their difficulties. And he and his kind of a group, he wasn't necessarily even the leader of the group, but he was part of a group of other Austrian physicians who found that people got better when they talked about their problems. And that was kind of the beginning of psychotherapy, which now if we come back we come up to present day, we've got an incredible armamentarium of interventions for mental health care. We certainly have psychiatric medications, we have psychotherapies. We are doing much more with things like transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is a much more acceptable, doable, low side effect treatment for depression using low levels of electrical magnetic stimulation rather than big shock treatments. And of course, we also have new treatments like psilocybin coming very soon. Ketamine is a very powerful treatment. And I think, we've got other psychedelic compounds that I know
MDMA.
what MDMA, and others that, I don't know if we want to get into them, but they aren't even tested and evaluated yet from a scientific perspective. But I know hundreds of guys that have gone and had these plant medicines, and to amazing benefit. Guys come back from some of these treatments saying, "Oh, it was like 20 years worth of psychotherapy packed into, a weekend," and that's going to be a game.
Our last episode, we had Dan Engel on talking about
Okay.
psychedelics. And
Okay.
So our audience is somewhat introduced to it, but we didn't go super deep with it. Yeah.
So let me ask you this, Chris, to scope it. Sean, when you think mental health, what do you think in terms of symptoms?
Well, for me, it's my involvement has been more on the downstream, trying to, get people involved in sports and skills that they could start developing a mastery and a skill set so that they have something at the end of the day to look forward to, feel better, be around a group, challenge themselves, doing difficult things, which I've seen people that come into a gym and they want to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, for instance, or boxing or kickboxing, and they're not in a good state, and you could just tell the way that they act, the way they socialize, they've kind of become inward. And when they're exposed to people specifically doing difficult, challenging things like boxing, going out of their comfort zone, it tends to make them at the, after a few months, you just see a very noticeable difference in their personality. They're a little more talkative, they're more engaging with people instead of so drawn out. And I've seen pretty amazing turnarounds from people doing sports like that, especially ex-military who've lost a group. They don't have, they're not doing anything hard every day. They're used to hard training every day and being around guys and the banter and the fun back and forth. If you take that away, it's not a good thing. So I've seen those, gyms really replace that for people. So that's been my experience. It's pretty profound too. I've seen pretty amazing changes.
Hey, Chris, I remember in San Francisco, we sat down with Sebastian Junger, which Sebastian Junger is sort of a self-proclaimed sociologist, and probably better trained than most.
He is a trained sociologist.
Is he? Okay. All right. So he lived at FOB Restrepo, which was in Korengal Valley with the Army for 1 year, like embattled for 1 year. So he's done documentaries, but he wrote a book called Tribe. Oh, yeah. And it's about homecoming and belonging, and focused on vets coming home from war. And what he found is, one, he looked at Native Americans because of the way they reintroduce, reintegrate, reassimilate their soldiers, Native American soldiers, into the tribe. They have a much lower suicide rate. Additionally, because their culture is different than mainstream American culture, and they put a precedence on, different things other than money. They also had a lower suicide rate. But, Chris, I do want to go to the question. When we say mental health, what sort of falls under that umbrella? Is it depression, anxiety?
Depression, anxiety. There are variations of both of those, many variations of both of those. Addiction's that's the other big one. And then a small percentage of Americans, small percentage of humans experience severe acute and chronic psychotic disorders like schizophrenia. And then we have many other variations that I think are much less common, such as eating disorders. And of course, what is an eating disorder? There is no really, with eating disorders, you've got high rates of depression and anxiety. So some people think eating disorders are more of a social manifestation of eating disorders. So kind of culturally bound. We didn't really have eating disorders as we understand them now until we had food security.
And now when we're working with veterans, we're primarily talking about cluster B. Would you agree with that, or Chris?
Cluster B. What do you mean by cluster B?
What are there's 5 in the cluster B.
The PTSD cluster B.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, because there's also a cluster B of personality disorders, which
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I meant. The personality disorders.
the personality disorders. So the personality disorders would be in cluster B would be borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial, and histrionic personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder, I think, is probably more common than we give it credit for. And so
Yeah.
in psychiatry, we differentiate between the personality disorders, which are, long-term kind of trait-based disorders, versus the more acute psychiatric disorders, but those can also be chronic, lifelong disorders as well. And just to go to what Sean said, I just want to give just say at the top of this, a few minutes ago, I talked about the medical treatments for depression and anxiety, but I think the non-medical treatments, the lifestyle things that we can do, are at least as powerful as treatment, if not more powerful. So
Yeah, there's a book, one of the first books written on chronotherapy. I think the title of it is Chronotherapy, and it was about definitely an Ivy League. I think it's Harvard, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But they were taking inpatients who had been inpatients for 10 years, on antipsychotics, and getting them, to go out and do essentially light therapy, circadian rhythm adjustments, with guidance from the practitioners. And about half of these people came off their meds and left the hospital when they hadn't, so we completely underestimate lifestyle, which, includes exercise, of course, but also sleep is a big component. There's really good research that suggests that almost all severe psychiatric struggles are preceded or co-manifest with sleep deprivation or chronically poor sleep. So that's another big factor. And of course, our organization screens people kind of for that with Hell Week. So we come from a culture that doesn't think that sleep is mandatory, right? Yeah. It's an option for us. But you get out in the civilian world and you get out of shape and start depending on some medications and alcohol and stuff like that, and kind of get in a depressive spiral, and then start messing with your sleep. Everything is way worse.
For both of you, to what degree is mental health, let's say, within the family genes, sort of congenital, I guess is the word, versus brought on by society?
Well, I would add, so maybe there's a few other pillars there. So genetics plays a large role. I mean, we know that some people are just more vulnerable than other people to depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, addiction, suicide itself. Runs in families, whether that's truly genetic, and it probably is to a certain extent in terms of the depressive aspect of things, and then the behavioral aspect of the act of taking your own life. If you've got family members that have done it prior to you, there is that gives people, I mean, your parents and grandparents are our role models typically, even when even after they've taken their lives.
Well, anything that exists in your family is if you grow up with it, it's sort of a flavor of normal. Whether
right.
It's
right.
It's an option. Like I have a lot of criminals in my family, so it's like I've seen that as an option. I chose not to do that.
I would not say that the apple fell far from the tree.
All my
You're just a white collar criminal.
It was legal. It was legal.
Chris, I remember a conversation. Okay, so one with the data, mental health or PTSD rates within veterans has increased compared to World War I, to World War II, to Korea, to Vietnam. We have a higher rate of post-traumatic stress within veterans. You could say mental health trauma, but I also remember you talking about how what makes it complicated is that mental health is a subjective diagnosis for the most part.
Well, very
Could
much
you sort of parlay into that?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, there's no blood test right now to make a diagnosis.
And really no imaging either. I mean,
there's no imaging.
Slight Yeah. So yeah, but really nothing.
Yeah, I mean, there's little signals here and there, and I
Yeah.
know that efforts are being made. And I read something recently, just a few days ago, about a blood test that purports to diagnose PTSD in soldiers. We're not there yet, and we thought we would be there 20 years ago. There was a shift circa around the year 2000 where a lot of the research became far more biological. NIH started saying, well, let's go find the molecular roots of mental illness. And so we've spent 20 some years trying to do that, but to small avail. We just haven't found it. We don't have the biomarker understanding yet to be able to do that. But so that said, how do we diagnose mental illness, psychiatric disorders? It's really interview based and questionnaire based. So it's very subjective. It's based on reports, verbal or written reports. And you can come at it from a variety of ways. Mike, I could talk to Jordan and learn some stuff about your functioning, your sleep, for example. I can say, hey, what's he doing at night? Is he sleeping? How much does he sleep? How long is he in bed? And you might tell me one thing, she might tell me a different thing. And then I can, pull that together.
I hope you're not talking to my wife.
No, it's been a while. It's been a while. But now that we're talking about it, I'm going to just make a little note. You need to check in. Wearables, we're now learning a lot of things with our wearables. The thing I look at most in mine, I don't really look at the exercise part of it. I don't really look at the calories expended and the steps taken and all that stuff. I look more for myself at my sleep. So every morning I look and how much sleep did I get? And typically what I find is I may have been in bed for 8 hours, but probably only got 6 hours of actual sleep because I wake up so often. And I didn't know I did that. If you would ask me, I got a solid 8 hours, but
I know a guy with a great supplement that might help.
Yeah, check in on that.
Please visit Doc Parsley's sleep aids for a perfect plug. With 6 hours, I can't remember the last time I got 6 hours based off my my wearables.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Problem.
We're kind of chasing that holy grail of being able to diagnose it with some sort of objective marker. But would you agree that in order to diagnose a depression or anxiety, or we'd have to be able to measure your thoughts somehow, right? I mean, because that's primarily what it is a thought disorder that's leading to physiology, or physiology leading to the thought disorder, who knows? But you'd have to know what people are thinking. So you're going to have to rely on some sort of subjective interview.
We may get there, Kirk. We may get to that point, Kirk, but
Yeah.
I would say it's even more complicated than that, because so just a little basic information on psychiatric disorders. There's two components that we look for. One is the distress. One is that sense of suffering, of being unhappy, of being, the misery. The other is, and we don't talk about this enough. The other is the functional impairment that goes with it. So if you're sad, but there's no functional impairment, we're not likely to make that as a diagnosis. Functional impairments are really important. Can you do what you need to do? Are you a good husband? Can you be an effective parent? How are you doing in school, at work? And yes, sleep becomes part of that as well. And there's a bidirectional relationship. If you're depressed and anxious, it makes it harder to sleep. And if you can't sleep, that does not so good things to our moods and our anxiety. So we have to look at we have to keep that perspective in mind. It's not just about suffering; it's also about impairment. When I talk to guys, or gals, when I talk to even my students in class, that I put sort of I have a little diagram that has a circle, and in that circle I have thoughts, behaviors, emotions, and then the physiological sense of functioning, or the actual physical sense of functioning. So I want to talk about all four of those things. And then you also,
speaking of dysfunction,
yes,
we got
the diva has entered the building.
Grace us with
I guess NFL games wait until John arrives. Chris, we apologize for this rudeness. No, welcome.
Do charity work.
Doing God's work. Well, welcome to the Men's Journal.
Of course, have
Everyday
some
Warrior,
charity
Live Hour
work,
Power.
huh?
Yeah,
Wasn't
of
just
course.
like-
Yeah.
Can we get you a drink or something? A spritzer?
Why are you pouring?
But go ahead. The behaviors, thoughts.
So I want to look at all of them. Just real quick example. If you're depressed, your emotions are going to be sad and hopeless, and others. Your behaviors are your thought. Let me go emotions, thoughts, behaviors first. So emotions, sadness. Thoughts are going to be pessimistic. Not hopelessness is a type of thought, but also just nothing's going to work. The world is not on my side. I could try doing this thing. I could go to jujitsu with and sparring with Sean, but that's not going to help me. So then we get to the behaviors, which is a pullback of activation, doing less physical, doing less social, engaging with the world less. So as we pull back, as we withdraw, as we isolate, that affects now where all of these three things affect our biology. We don't have the energy, we don't have the strength, we're fatigued, we don't feel good, pain gets accentuated. It actually accentuates the pain. And so this is a vicious cycle that I just described. These things all affect each other and they all make each other worse. But there is good news. And the good news is this gives us multiple points to kind of enter this cycle and try to affect change. So jujitsu, physical activity like that is one of the best things we can do for ourselves. I'm not saying jujitsu specifically, but that kind of challenge and physical effort on a regular basis, which, by the way, has a social component to it usually and a cognitive component to it as well. I mean, you're playing chess on a mat, essentially. So all of that is phenomenally good for us. And that interrupts that cycle, starts to change that vicious, nasty cycle into a more virtuous cycle.
I'd be interested. So it seems like social media is creating a whole subset of psychology. To what degree have we exacerbated the problem with social media in terms of mental health? Because it seems like there's definitely a correlation that mental health has increased, or mental health issues with social media. And it seems like, I hate to say it, man, I'll say it, we're creating more victims, or people that just subjectively say I have mental health issues.
Or is it more polarizing?
It could be.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you take everything and just amplifies it a million times over, and you're creating more problems than maybe that don't exist.
Well, and it has all of the anxiety producing components of group interaction without actually interacting with the group as well.
Fear of missing out.
Yeah.
FOMO.
So it isolates us. It isolates us. As John said, it divides us because it's polarizing us. It's flooding us with just a constant torrent of bad news, bad things. The world is falling apart, and many people in the world are evil. I mean, we've become a self-loathing society, thanks in part, maybe not entirely, but at least thanks in part to social media. And then you have the social comparison effect. So if I'm looking at social media and I'm looking at Mike Sorelli's, man, that he's buff, he's handsome, he's
Jumping out of airplanes.
He's jumping out of airplanes. He's got cool friends. He's got cool
Hell with
dudes.
that guy.
Is this part of Mike's therapy? Are you doing therapy on Mike right now?
Mike, you're an amazing person. You're like the Jack Handy of the.
I've known Chris for God knows how many years now, and you still can't get my last name right. But nor could the guys that served with me for 20 years.
So how do I feel good about myself when I see this? Now, what Mike's probably not doing on his social media is he's probably not posting about his bad days. He may not be posting, when he's in his, his undershorts and not feeling good. And, we all post, people post their best, and they use, they use filters, they accentuate the positive. So everybody else looks like they have a perfect life except for me when I'm looking on it. And with that social comparison, I'm not keeping up with the Joneses. And that makes me feel bad about myself. And that's actually a known psychological phenomena, even apart from social media. And now we have studies showing that the more time you spend on Facebook, it actually causes you to be more depressed.
Yeah. I mean, that's understandable.
Yeah.
The happiness factor. Go ahead, Chris?
Well, I was just gonna throw out to all of you guys. I mean, just kind of thinking about why are we where we're at now? I mean, we have dramatically rising rates of depression and anxiety, especially among young people. You go to a college campus, I think the rate of depression and anxiety is now 40%. That's double what it was 10 or 15 years ago. It's triple what it was 25 years ago. Why? What's going on here in our society? In theory, we have better mental health treatments. We have better medications. We have better information about counseling, and yet, we're laying an egg when it comes to society raising our kids. So, are young people less hardy? Do they have meaning in their life? Are they more isolated? Are they not as educated as they once were, and therefore vulnerable to propaganda around them? Are they? How are we parenting and educating our children? Are we allowing them the chance to fall on their face and fail, which is what we need as a species? Is we need that chance to get out there and have the opportunity to not be great at everything we do, to not succeed at everything we do. So we learn. And then you add one more thing, which is, the obesity and our, the declining health of young
Horrible nutrition.
horrible nutrition.
Dude, I just did a consult on with a guy the other day. They went in, they got tested, low T. They gave him the T. Body fat was too high, aromatized all to estrogen and put him in a worse situation. So now you have a situation where not even the drugs that are supposed to be helping you are helping you.
Well, bad doctoring.
Oh, terrible. and then you know what? He's like, what should I do? I'm like, you need like an AI or something. And the doctor's like, oh, we don't prescribe that stuff.
Yeah, the evil.
Yeah, it's
stuff.
evil. I mean, is it I mean, can we really put this on the shoulders of social media? I mean, or is it just a systemic
I think
issue?
It's one
Well,
component.
is it or is it the canary in the coal mine where now this is letting us know that there's all these other systemic problems? Like I didn't realize there were so many bad parents in the world. And then all you got to do is go to Little League to see it happen.
Well,
if you want to go to the nuclear family, that's declined.
yeah. So I got to ask: did social media grow out of this population, or did social media help form this population? So, like, it has to be both by definition.
All of the above, I would say.
Yeah, since they, but we know for a fact. I mean, you're a parent. Like all of us have seen the helicopter parenting. The mother that goes in there and argues with the teacher because their son got in trouble for doing something wrong that he shouldn't have done. As Chris was saying, you take away a child's ability to solve their problems. And that's when you're supposed to learn how to solve problems. It's when you have support, when you have people around you who love you unconditionally, it can help you get back up when you get your teeth kicked in and go, oh, that didn't work. And, go get them next time, Tiger. And if you don't do that, the first time they're ever going to experience that is when they're young adults. And there's no
you
support.
Don't want failure to happen in your 20s or 30s.
No, you don't want your first big disappointment to happen to you in your 20s and you don't have anybody around and everybody expects you to be a man or an adult or whatever and solve your own problems, and you don't even know how to solve your problems because you've never done it. And that's very, very common.
So we're getting into mental toughness and grit. And Chris, I'd be interested in your opinion in this, but are we sheltering or safeguarding our kids so much from uncomfortable situations and failure that we're creating a society that's less mentally tough, which then leads to more mental health issues?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as Kirk just said, young people today they don't get as many opportunities to learn how to negotiate disagreements, to learn how to handle and manage different problems, solve different problems, to learn how to handle stress. But there's another piece of it. We used to talk about something called stress inoculation, where little bits of stress as a child with adults around you to catch you if you really fall is good for us. That's kind of what the military does. You guys did a little stress inoculation in basic training and buds and everything along the way. If you don't get that exposure, and it's a form of I mean, it's an analogy to an inoculation. A little bit of stress helps you deal with bigger stressors, and we've kind of removed that for many children, not all children.
And at the end of the day, it's all some form of courage, right? It's being able to handle adversity by and large is doing things that are uncomfortable. And we know You know, how do you handle somebody who has an anxiety disorder? You voluntarily expose them to the stressor to greater and greater degrees over time.
Exactly.
They don't become any less afraid of it. They're still just as afraid of the elevator as they always were, but they've developed some courage and some techniques to get through it. And so that's what kids have to learn. And we all learned it super young because we didn't have a choice. You know, we didn't have the network, the all the communication, all of the observation, all of the surveillance of us. Like, I got on my bike in the summer at 7 a.m. I came home at like 9:30 p.m. when the street lights came on. I might have been in a fist fight and, killed a poisonous snake and, rode motorcycles all around, rode my bike all around, like whatever.
Is
Who
it
knows
because
what
parents have too much access that like would our parents have had the same response if they had known what they're really up to?
Possibly. I mean, you got a little dongle on your kid, a little surveillance device on your kid all the time. You know exactly where they are, what they're doing, who they're hanging out with. They're posting on social media. They're outing themselves for doing stupid things. I mean,
I think you could say that the parents are just as crummy in the 80s as they are now. I think that, having all that free time that we all had, and we're like going out with the guys in the neighborhood and playing, creating social games and having to
which kept us off of social media,
exactly.
right? We didn't have the social
But
media.
yeah, that's the thing.
So we're doing that
like,
instead.
So now if you're in that same scenario, video games outcompete that. Because you can get the thrill without having to actually do the hard sport. We'd throw rocks at each other because it was a thrill. But there's a physical aspect of that, and you challenge the neighborhood kids and whatnot, and it was fun. But if we had video games, maybe we would have just sat there like turds and just not done anything. I mean, who knows how that social media would have outcompeted the other options. And it's like, I don't know how you fight that now where kids are alone. Maybe their parents are gone. They get out of school. Now they can just play a video game or go on social media for 5 hours instead of having to go outside and meet the neighborhood kid.
And the parents are just as distracted as the kids too. I mean, the parents are on social media too.
Even more so. The speed of business and the speed of life is increased.
And everybody's in a 2-income household almost, right? Like 85% of the population now, you have to have both parents working. They're strung out. They're stressed out. They're on social media. They're hearing all the bad news.
Well, so my daughters are 11, and I've taught them to drive so they can drive the car around. And they were like, why? Like parents, like in their friends are like, why do you guys want to drive? I'm like, I used to drive when I was 11 and I would drive to the store. And they blew the kids' minds. Like, wait a minute, you drove California, out on the road, like they couldn't figure it out. And I'm like, yeah, you guys should learn to drive. We learned to drive when we were kids, and we would drive around all the time. We had to wash cars. We moved around. We drive to the store, drive around. And I'm teaching them how to drive. And like all of a sudden, we went to our parent teacher kind of deal. They were like, Jamie said she drives. I'm like, yeah, she drives. She drives around the ranch.
Child Protective Services comes in the back door.
And then the other one, this story I just dealt with yesterday. They have a Discord for their class for the kids, and then they started their own private Discord that was just like some of the kids. And so I'm in their private Discord because they need adult supervision. And one of the kids that wasn't in there wanted to be in there, and they wouldn't let him. So then he told his mom, who called the teacher, and then my daughter and her friends had to go in and have a sit down with this whole thing about what's going on in this private thing. And her first thing was like, it's very like, she's like, oh, it's not a big deal. My dad's in it. So then I get texted. I'm like, yeah, I'm in this thing. What's going on? And they're like, were they posting memes? I'm like, no, I'm posting memes. like I'm probably the biggest troublemaker in there. These kids are like the most like, I was really hoping for more. Like, I'm like, you guys suck as kids. We would have been talking way more shit. But I don't know, man. It's I just wonder.
John's there to encourage disobedience.
Yes, I am. I'm like, whoa. Yeah. You need to find me more Biden memes.
Yeah, there's a healthy disrespect for authority.
Yeah.
We talked about that in the teams.
Yeah.
So we've got a great question, and I want to remind the audience, please submit your questions, YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever platform you're on, we'll get to them. But this one's interesting. I do ultimately want to get to what do you think are the best ways to combat mental health or build mental fitness, as we talk about? Because within the Everyday Warrior, 3 pillars: physical fitness. We don't call it mental health. We call it mental fitness. Mm-hmm. It is a muscle. You don't use your brain. You don't stress it.
Biggest muscle.
And then, of course, spiritual as well. But this one, and Will, if you could look up anything on the world's happiest countries. So the question is, some stats on depression rates by country would suggest that the rates are higher in Western nations. How much of this is likely down to tracking of stats? How much is down to cultural expectations and the pressure to achieve happiness? and the expectations that we have to be happy, or what happy even means by culture. One, please structure your questions in proper English. I would appreciate that.
This is your dog?
This is my dog,
What's his name?
Bing. He's actually 7 today.
Is he Dutch Shepherd?
Dutch Shepherd.
Guys,
Beautiful, huh?
Yeah,
He's officially the Men's Journal.
dude,
dog.
we just became best friends. So.
Good, and he will bite you.
Oh, no, he
So-
already got me once.
He's actually
So
just
what
protecting
Western
me from
society,
you sitting in-
and we've seen this,
he's in
and guys, I'm giving you crap about the questions. It's really, but we put a precedence on money. Happiness equals money in the United States. Am I wrong there? Or?
Yeah, that was I think a Reuters poll, was it, that came out a few weeks ago, and it was the values and patriotism went from like 80% down to 35% or something, and family values, getting married, having kids, having a good job, meaning from your work, all that stuff had all gone down, many standard deviations down, and the only thing that went up was money, the importance of money.
So here's my question, and we all know this. What are the Nordic countries doing that's equating to such happiness? And
Is it all
Chris, have
beautiful women?
you ever looked at this?
Have you ever been to Denmark, Iceland, and Sweden?
No, I haven't.
I've traveled pretty extensively through it. I can't necessarily tell you what the difference is, other than the fact that when we were in Norway, I didn't see any obese people. That was a really interesting one. And I know when we were in Sweden, they made jokes about the only fat people you ever see are tourists. So like, I know that like in Sweden, like they ride bikes.
Cancel,
like,
first off, cancel Sweden.
yeah. Oh yeah. But like they don't have elevators, and people ride bikes places, and this. There was just like a lot more people outside. And I wonder, because it's so cold there, that they go into the darkness, and then when they come out of the sun, it's kind of a little bit
More social, the more family oriented, and all the women are super hot.
And
I mean,
also, it's a very
gets rid of
homogeneous
depression right there.
It's a homogeneous society, and
Yeah.
that everybody kind of
That's
looks
true.
like. When I went to Denmark, that's where my family is from. My grandparents. When we went there, like all the dudes were like 6'2", 6'3", 6'4",
Yeah, I remember
6'5".
their special forces.
I,
guys
I,
were
I
all-
like walked up, and there was a dude at the door who was like 6'7", like at a bar, and I was like,
You say, hey, little
"Hey,
guy.
what's up?" And but it was kind of neat to be around like a bunch of people of like, they're not real big, but like pretty fit. Everybody just feels very nice. I kind of dug it.
Yeah,
I
I
definitely liked it.
Well, and they're also, don't they have societal norms, like everyone is like in the sauna?
That's
Like
in
it-
Finland. Yeah,
Finland
they
and-
have a big sauna culture.
So
we did a bunch of stuff in Sweden and Norway. It was great.
So I went to the University of Copenhagen in Denmark for a year of college.
Did you hang out in Christiania?
I did. Well, I don't know if I
Me too.
hung out there, but made regular visits there, perhaps.
Yeah, we hung out a little bit in Christiania. Okay.
Yeah.
That's always my check on people.
And I would say it was probably just to support the data you're showing there. It was probably the happiest year of my life in terms of just really kind of feeling happy and enjoying myself. And it was very notable to me. And this was 1984. There really was no obesity there. The body composition of people at that time was different from Americans at that time. I can't even imagine the difference now. And if I go back to that poll that Kirk just mentioned, I think it was a Wall Street Journal NORC poll that showed basically faith, patriotism, and work ethic dropped from like 75% down to 25%, roughly speaking. Massive drops. So we've lost our sense of who we are. We're not connected positively to our past, to what our ancestors did and who they were. We don't have, like, who are we now? What's our meaning? Why do we even exist? And so when you put in this self-loathing about how America's destroying the planet, we've got the worst poverty in the world, which is not true, by the way, of course. But we've got all these myths about how
founded on slavery and evils and all that stuff.
Yeah, all of that. And I'll put it out there. What does it say about a society that prioritizes abortion as one of its top social issues that people
Right.
either are strongly against or strongly for? I mean, to me, that's
Chris-
just part of our self-loathing.
So
Value
Chris,
is different.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's yeah. Over.
I was going to say, would you agree? I mean, I feel like almost every guy that I get a call from who's really struggling, no matter how well I know them, or if I don't know them at all, without me directly asking it, I always hear some version of they lack a purpose in life.
Yes.
They came out of being
Same.
tier one, best in the world at what they do, to being a nobody in their hometown, or at least away from their tribe, away from their people, away from what's normal to them. All the compensatory techniques that they had for other TBIs that worked with all their buddies don't make any sense in the world they're in now. And I'd say we could apply that, I think, to the nihilism of this younger generation that seems to be struggling so bad. Is I don't think they, by and large, they don't really report a high purpose either, right? You look at that poll we're talking about, what would be their only purpose would be to make more money. Well, everybody our age knows that there's almost no correlation to that. Like once your basic needs are met, I know miserable wealthy people. I know,
Yep.
I know poor people that are, what most people would consider poor, but they have their basic needs met and they're happy as they can be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's got to be a big part of it, because it just correlates too well. When our guys are struggling, it's a lack of purpose. When these young kids are struggling, seems to be a lack of purpose in a lot of them, right?
I've said that, in the military, well, one, you can't get a raise. The pay grades are set.
Right.
And you really didn't care about money. I mean, you did to a degree, but it wasn't the main concern. It was the job and what you were doing in the guys. You had such a sense of purpose and focus outside of the monetary side of it, and you don't join the military to get rich.
Not if you have a room temperature IQ.
I
mean,
or
above.
Yeah, I was extremely happy. Not to say it because my wife's listening. She wasn't with me at the time. No, I'm extremely happy now, but it was one less stressor in my life.
For sure.
At that time, I mean. I'm sure your heyday playing, your heyday fighting, that's all you focused on. You didn't care about the rest.
Yeah. I think, obviously having something to do every day that makes you feel better, that you're growing, you're getting better, you're improving. Then at the end of the day, that was your purpose, right? You have something that you can look back on. Today, I did something hard. I got a little better, and you're going to feel good. Even if it's like backyard and it's like, and I go back and I mow and I weed, it's like, I don't want to do it.
The concept of making your bed in the morning.
Yeah,
right?
but
it's the same idea,
but it's weird. It's a hard,
bigger and
how do you
bigger.
explain that to someone young? Like actually doing hard work is going to make you feel good.
Right.
What is the case though? It's the truth. But then if there's so many easy things that interfere with that hard work and so many tools that are replacing it and so many machines doing that stuff now, it's like, less people have purpose because it's a hard lesson to learn, and old guys are dying and aren't able to pass that lesson on. Actually, you have to rake, you have to do hard physical labor. You have to socialize. You got to play hard games. You got to wrestle. You got to be physical. You got to do all those things that we're designed to do. And you remove all those things, and then you start seeing these kind of epidemics, I think.
And you chase your dopamine through your phone or your video game instead.
Yeah. Trouble.
Yeah. Chris, let's talk about how you combat mental health. The best ways to go about it to live the optimal life for mental fitness. But we recently had a doctor on in Will. I'm blanking on his name, but basically he said his hypothesis was that mental health is a metabolic disease, much like diabetes, heart disease, things along those lines. And he found, based off data, that keto diet reduced depression and anxiety pretty quickly, and those that stayed on it continued to reduce. Once they came off the keto diet, depression and anxiety resulted. So across the spectrum, guys, I'd love to hear for the listeners, what do you think are the best ways to stay mentally fit, to ward off depression, anxiety, addiction, suicidal thoughts?
So very good. I mean, very good research in recent years shows that it's multifactorial. I mean, we've talked about this, so let's stipulate. We all agree it's multifactorial. But chronic systemic inflammation in our bodies, which is typically a result of our modern lifestyles, sedentary and poor diet, that chronic inflammation, which drives heart disease, drives metabolic problems, diseases, drives autoimmune diseases, essentially every chronic disease, including chronic psychiatric illness. Depression is heavily influenced by chronic systemic inflammation, which we can measure, C-reactive protein in the bloodstream, the interleukins. So there is no doubt that mental illness is a real thing at the physiological, the cellular, the molecular level even. So anything that's anti-inflammatory from a lifestyle perspective is going to help people feel better. And so, I put the pillars are pretty much the same as we've been talking about: good sleep, appropriate exercise, and a anti-inflammatory diet, which means essentially eliminating junk food, fast food, soda, added sugars, and eating whole foods, focusing on whole foods. So those are all non-negotiable. And then I would add two other things which we've talked about. One is the social connection of being with people, engaging with people. We evolved as social creatures, hunter-gatherer tribes, all the way to present day. We've always been interdependent on one another. Nobody survives on their own, truly on their own. So that social connection is really important. And then the last thing I would put out there is meaning and purpose. When people don't have meaning and purpose, then what's the point? We need those challenges. We need the goals, and we have to have earned success. So, if we receive gifts, if we receive money, if we receive things for which we haven't, strived
Trophies.
for, trophies, it doesn't mean as much to us. Yeah, everybody gets a trophy. It doesn't mean anything. But if you've earned your success, if you went out there and you did the work and you earned it, especially if it's meaningful, especially if you've done things that have benefited society and other people in our community, that's what it takes. And of course, part of that is a daily structure, daily activities, a reason to get out of bed in the morning.
I think you could add animals into that.
Yeah.
I
Taking
live
care of dogs and
I live next door to a horse ranch. Lady, my next door neighbor has a riding school, and I think she has 60 some horses, and I think there's 300 kids a day that show up to ride. And there's like this entire microcosm, and like the kids take care of the horses and this, and I think there's a really interesting connection with the animals, and like helping, and there's therapies in this, and I mean, like, if there's a dog, I'm going to pet it. Like, believe me, I feel way better with a dog on my foot, especially if I'm eating. If there's not a dog underneath the table, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Well, like, 'cause I have like this, like as soon as I go, this guy, I'm like, I think there's an interesting connection where if you're depressed, I think get a dog. Like, have an animal.
There's psychology, or there's research in the psychology field that when you give nursing home patients plants, they live longer. And they only live longer if they're taking care of the plants. If you give them a plant and somebody else takes care of the plant, then it doesn't extend their life. And if you take their plants away, they're more likely to die.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a small purpose, but it's a purpose, right?
Well, you need something bigger.
Some sort of connection to the world, and we continually as a society building ourselves as a species less and less connected to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Everything is partitioned, right?
Well, I mean, like all you have to do is go on social media, and I posted something about Dr. Shannon Swan's countdown, and I was reading the comments of people being like, "I would never bring a child into this earth," and like this terrible thing. And I'm reading this thing, I'm like, so the single greatest connection you can have, which is effectively like procreating and raising your own offspring, if you want to connect into like everything in life. Because I always wonder, my friends, no offense if you don't have kids or not married, but I'm like, what do you do with all your time?
Yeah.
I was like, I got 3 kids and a wife. Like, I was up at 5 a.m. today, and I felt like I've lived like 3 lives before noon today.
Yeah.
And but I mean, that's good because you're busy. I feel like a lot of this social media and like a lot of the wasted time on this, there's like this like pit of despair that people get into the scroll, where like you can go do all this stuff. You don't have to watch somebody else do something.
Right.
Like, I really liked playing football. I don't really like watching football.
I'm saying, like, I don't watch it at all.
like all this porn addiction stuff. I'm like, no, you can go meet girls or
Yeah.
guys or whatever, and you can make your own stuff. But like, why would you like?
Just don't post it on the internet.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I mean, I love watching boxing, not because I'm like a huge boxing fan, but because I'm like looking at the way those guys are moving, and I'm like, could I move like that? Look at that! Like, look at the way these things go. Like, I just think that there's we've turned into a society of like doers and people that are sad that they're watching other people do stuff that they want to be doing, but they can do it.
That's the FOMO.
I was trying to explain this to my kids. I'm like, don't watch the parade go by, be in the parade. I
Right.
feel like this is watching the parade go by.
Yeah.
I think that's a product of how people are raised and the fact that just people don't like being uncomfortable anymore.
So if
Well, they don't have the skills. They don't have the skill set to be uncomfortable.
If I could chime in on what you just said, what Mike just said about being uncomfortable. Yeah, get into the arena. When I ask my students, when I ask my freshman students, I teach college, humble college professor, teach students, undergraduates. When I ask them what they want for their future, it used to be, I used to hear a wide range of variable answers. Nowadays, the most common, and it's almost every student in the class endorses this response of what they want in their future is financial stability and comfort. They want and I asked them, well, what is it about financial stability? Or what even is that? Like, well, I want a job where I can, just go to work, not have to worry about money, and not have.
And they all miss the component of it that you have to be worth money. You have to be valuable for people to give you money.
Yeah.
Like, you don't just get money because you went to college and you went
Well,
applied for jobs. Like, you have to be valuable,
this
which
is-
means you have to learn how to do things. You have to develop skills. You have to develop mental toughness. You have to learn how to negotiate and communicate and be a person that people value, and then they pay you. That's where financial stability comes from. But there's this belief among this younger population that's just going through the right steps, and then it's a foregone conclusion that once you get there, you're going to make X number of dollars, and everything's just going to fall into place, and your house will appear, and your kids will appear, and your cars will appear, and your whatever.
I'm not so sure it's just the next generation. I think it's our generation as well.
Well,
It's just human nature.
We're the parents.
Yeah.
So
Where are you learning from?
Yeah, I mean, it's really like let's give you an example. Another one. We went to Costa Rica last year, and we stayed at like this. We basically rented this place in the jungle because I wanted to see like legit Costa Rica. And then we went to the Four Seasons for the last 2 days, and like the rain was awful. It was amazing. What do? 8:00, we show up, and if there's a pool, we're throwing a football, and I'm gonna have drinks, and we're gonna like play, and we're gonna get as many kids as we can to have like a football pool game. And so I recruited all these kids, and we were having a blast. And there was a couple there that showed up, and she's obviously Instagram influencer, smoke show, wearing this outfit.
Yeah.
She had all these like gold things all over her body, and was out there trying to take pictures.
Yeah.
And it started to rain, and there was 50 kids trying to play a pool football game. And the anger and disgust on her face was great. So then I started just throwing the ball and splashing her. She literally walks off in a huff because she couldn't get her pictures in this, and then we never saw her again. But I'm like, dude, you're on vacation in this amazing pool. Like, enjoy the situation. Like it's not about taking a picture for you to post at other people to show that you're having a good time. Like, don't argue about what a good man is. Be a good man. Like, don't argue and like show people be a time. Go have fucking fun. There's this kick-ass bar. They had all these different drinks. I wanted to try every single one of them and play football with my kids.
I'd be interested in the data because our generation went to nature a lot more than it seems that this current generation does. Parents are taking them out.
We did so much scary shit that parents today are like, like I tell my kids stories and like, it sounds great. Like, I was like, we can go do this stuff. Like,
Yeah,
let's go have adventures.
I remember we were making Molotov cocktails, not throwing them in buildings or anything, but we do it out in nature or in a cement lot, and we did crazy shit. But also, you went out into nature. I mean, you got dirty. We were getting dirty. You'd go catch frogs or try to catch snakes in California.
Gasoline you can light on fire, but to light diesel on fire, you have to do aerosol. So if you put it in like a squirt bottle, you can actually light diesel on fire.
John,
right?
John,
like we figured that out
this
at probably
is
10 years old.
This is an insurance risk right now.
Yeah.
Can you edit that bit out?
But I mean, like we figured that stuff out pretty good. And then when the lights went up, we used to take tennis balls and put them in gasoline, set them, and then play
Roll
with
them.
those outside. And I know all this stuff is stupid, but like there was an element like our parents weren't over. Like that's the thing. One thing I worry too much is that because we're so connected, that we're kind of like always eavesdropping on the kids. Like I feel like we'll sit around I just went and saw my brothers in California, and we were sitting there laughing, and my mom's like, where was I when you guys were doing all this? And we were like, we don't know where you were. like today now, like doesn't exist. Like parents, like I just wonder if we've become so much more connected, or maybe that we're so much more involved than we used to be.
Probably.
Kirk
I don't
Parsley,
remember
right?
like having long conversations with my dad or doing a ton of things with him. He wasn't around. I was like out with other kids.
Yeah.
Like, or the neighborhood's dads or some other dad was there, but it wasn't like he was there all. I can't even remember like we go and do sports things in the weekend, but like weekdays they was working. Like
Yeah,
it wasn't a lot of like parent time. Like I didn't.
So in the years after you left home as a young adult, how often did you talk? How often did you call home
Hardly ever.
on average?
Well, so
My mom says I didn't call her for the first 2 years I was in the Navy, but I don't think that's true. I think it's more like 18 months.
So I went to Berkeley and I played football, and I came home and I remember I called my dad and I was like, Dad, I'm super tired. Like others, like we practice till 7, 8 o'clock at night. I come home, I got to study, I got class. And my dad's solution was like, what you should do is come home and go right to bed and then just wake up at 4 a.m. and study before class. And I was like, that's a great idea. So I went to bed the next morning.
Woke up at 7.
He called at 4:01 and was like, just calling to wake you up. And I was like, yeah, I'm up. And I hung up on him. And then like 2 minutes later, he called me back because my dad like woke up super early. He called me and he proceeded to call me at 4 a.m. every single day for the next like X amount of years. So every morning we'd wake up, have a short
Too
conversation.
bad he didn't get to meet Jocko before.
My dad was Jocko long before Jocko was Jocko. And he would wake
The
up
pre-Jocko.
and be literally on.
Yeah.
Like not like groggy and being like, hey, I was reading last night this biography about Lincoln, and we'd have these like intellectual conversations. And I remember my girlfriend at the time was like, your dad's fucking insane. I'm like, yeah, in a good way. But that was what I do. I'd get up at 4 a.m. and I would study, and that's how I got through college.
I was talking to Sean.
So I
earlier.
talk to him every day.
Yeah. I was talking to Sean earlier. So you've seen depression, suicide rates in the veteran community. You've seen it in the NFL, and that may be a byproduct of CTE. And I mean, there's definitely a linkage
Well,
there.
you
that
can
brain
cure all
trauma.
that now.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
But Doc and I know.
oxygen
Yeah.
champ.
Yeah.
So,
There's a lot of ways.
but additionally, we talked about Hollywood, high
Mhm.
suicide rate. You look at Robin
Yeah.
Williams, comedian who brought so much joy to the
But
world.
he had meant like some form of like neurological decline kind of a deal.
And I had Zach Williams on, who was his son,
Oh.
remarkable individual, and he calls it death by suicide. But when's the last time you heard about mental health issues within combat arms? Combative sports like MMA or boxing? I'm trying to think of one. I can't remember.
No, there was that. I mean, he didn't technically suicide, but the dude, just like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, he rode his motorcycle out into the desert or something and just ended up in the middle of the desert out of gas and 50 miles from anywhere.
Yeah, the guy from Oregon, long
Yeah.
hair.
Yeah.
I think he just got lost. He used to always go. out
I
there.
was gonna say, or he just
Or
is
he
not
just
a
got
good
lost.
He's
planner.
like
and
one of those guys that just goes out in the
But
wilderness.
the
he
one
passed
thing,
away.
the
Yeah.
one thing with the MMA guys and the fighters is they have camps and they have training partners.
Yeah.
Like I feel like if you have somebody who's expecting to see you somewhere every day, and then like it's kind of like last week we were in
post competition. They
Yeah.
crash.
but then they
Right.
become coaches, right?
Yeah.
Like last week we went to California and I didn't go to jiu-jitsu. I got all these text messages like, what's wrong? How come I didn't see you? What's how come you missed? And I'm like, dude, I had to go visit my mom for Easter. Like, I'll be back. Don't worry.
So almost like an accountability partner, what
Well,
we
yeah.
call a swim buddy in the Navy.
Yeah, because you got people looking for you. I never I've told everybody, if you feel lonely or depressed, go join a jiu-jitsu place, because you'll end up with 25 new friends you didn't know you needed, who are legitimately like looking after you. It's the wildest thing I've ever seen.
What is it, man?
Well, yeah, I think it is being in a group that is doing difficult things too, like challenging difficult things that are out of your comfort zone daily. And that really has a huge effect. It was interesting because when I was in college, right out of college, I was working at a nightclub in Hollywood, like the worst nightclub you could imagine. And it had a depressing effect on me, but I was also training every day. So it kind of balanced me. But for 2 years I did that job, and it was scary because I didn't recognize it, which is the hard thing, I think, until I lost the job and I got fired. And then I moved to Santa Barbara, and it was like the sun came up and I was just like, what the hell? And it was like the most depressive job ever. Stressful, evil people. Every night you see people at their worst,
Just
common
evil hot
denominator.
chicks. Why
There was a lot of- yeah.
Why were you fired, Sean?
It's like, one of those clubs that starts big and then goes down.
Yeah.
But by the end, you're like, taking money for people to get in. And I think they just start changing the promoters, and they just kind of changed the doorman. They almost just like put a new face up and reopened. So it wasn't like
the remodel.
wasn't really
The
like
reopening.
I did anything that I hadn't been doing the whole time. Like, you're always taking money, but it's like, it was only like an hour and a half every night. And I was in college. I would make like $1,100 in cash in like 2 hours. So it was like, I'm making good money. I'm spending money, but I was like,
we're rich.
Yeah.
We're rich.
But the relationships I had with the people there were like miserable relationships, like miserable people.
Where'd you go to college?
UCLA.
Oh, you went to UCLA.
Yeah. And it was like, it was weird because I didn't realize I was depressed until I left. But it was 2 years I was going down, down.
Was
down.
it the powder blue that you had to wear all the time at UCLA? You know, it's the reason I couldn't go to UCLA.
Oh,
I
really?
remember when we were like on the recruiting trip, we walked in and they were showing us our uniforms and everything. And I'm like, I don't think I can wear that powder blue. It just like the least.
It's not in your color palette for sure.
No, it's not. Powder blue is not my color.
I experienced the same thing in medical training when I was an intern. You rotate through trauma surgery, and the reason it's called an intern is because you're interred. So you're like you live, like you're buried in there. And we didn't even go home. We had apartments behind the hospital, and man, I thought for sure I wanted to be a trauma surgeon. You know, it's like I loved it, but I mean, never was I sleeping more than 2 hours at a time. For the whole 8 weeks, there was always something to do. You're always running, like sprinting to get to places. There was always something exciting to do. And then I left that and I went to, that was in Hillcrest. Then I went to Balboa, or not, where the new Navy accommodations are, where they got rid of the Navy base, and there's all that. There's a clinic there, and the first day, the nurse comes in my office around noon, and she's like, "Well, that's all your patients for now until after lunch." I was like, "What do you mean lunch?" She's like, "Yeah, you have an hour and a half for lunch." I'm like, "What?" Like, I don't have anything to do for an hour and a half. So I went out and I sat on the bay and I was looking out at the sailboats going by, and I'm like eating a sandwich. I'm going, "What the hell was I thinking? I want to be a trauma surgeon." That was so dark. Like, I look back, I was like, "Man, that was like dark and gloomy and heavy." I just like got progressively beaten down into thinking that was normal, man. But it's a horrible life.
But then resilience is almost like we're designed to be resilient. So then you could take a certain amount, and then there's a point where it's probably tips, and then people go down. They don't even realize it. That's a tough thing if you can't recognize it till it's almost too late.
What about reflection, Chris? In terms of people just sort of going through life without asking themselves questions. You know, you've probably heard it. The quality of your life is usually determined by the quality of questions you ask yourself on a daily basis. What are those small things, you know, the small techniques of journaling, things you could do for 5 minutes, breathing techniques? Have you looked at those, any data on if those assist people, you know, developing, let's say, positive daily habits that just sort of keep them mentally fresh?
Yeah. I mean, you just said it. You just said it. I think you have to, I think if we go back to younger, you know, the younger people that maybe are not as quick to want to get outside of their comfort zone. If you're reflecting, you're getting outside your comfort zone. If you're thinking about your life, if you're asking yourself those questions, if you're writing, if you're journaling, that requires you to do a little bit of self, look in the mirror and see what's there. That may not be comfortable. So that may be something that people don't do often. I would add, in addition to that, so I say yes, and I would say what I call recovery practices. So what are we doing that allows ourselves to recover? And I don't even necessarily mean from a extraneous activity, but just sort of mentally, psychologically, physiologically. So meditation, getting out in nature. One thing that we now know works really well is hot sauna bathing. There's randomized controlled trials in the medical literature showing that 20 minutes of hot sauna 3 times a week reduces chronic inflammation in the body and helps people. I mean, and it's antidepressant. So when we go back to why is Finland so happy, they do a lot of hot sauna bathing. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but it's probably actually one of them. So
There's
I think
a lot more nature.
A lot more nature,
Yeah,
and a lot
I mean,
less of the
that's-
other stuff that we're talking
Well, I
about.
mean, you brought up in Copenhagen, I don't think that we ever took a taxi. We didn't rent a car. We just walked everywhere.
Yeah.
Same in Sweden and Stockholm. I mean, everywhere we went, they're kind of set up for you to be, and it's almost like it's not like you're just in LA, like in paved concrete. Like and people are just a lot more, I think, just more
Mhm.
apt to get into nature. So
Walking and cycling, there's parks. If you live away from the city, there's good public transportation that takes you there and gets you close to where you're going, and then you walk a half a mile. Yeah, absolutely.
I found that in almost every country I travel to, everybody walks a lot more.
I
You
like
know, all of Europe, all the Scandinavian countries. Even when I went to Peru, it's like there were hardly any cars at all. Everybody walked, and you know, you might walk 5 miles to go to dinner and go up 1,000 feet of elevation, and you know, be sweaty by the time I get to dinner.
Well, one of my favorites is where we were in Holland. You know, like the pretty girls on bicycles with the baskets, like all dressed up, like going out or like going to work, like riding their bicycles and with the basket in front, like, and just that was our joke, being like, all you got to do if you want to meet a pretty girl in Holland is just walk on the bike path and get hit. Like that was our like, what do you think? We just get hit by these pretty girls, like, and they were always going somewhere. So I like, yeah, it just was. I think it's just a different society, different culture.
And when do they? How modern was that? How recent was that map you showed for the Depression?
2023.
Okay.
Is
I know
there,
they're becoming less happy.
is there
with
any
their
place in the U.S.
immigration with all their?
Is there any place in the U.S. that's like when we were looking at the map, you know, broke it by country? I just wonder if there's any
By state.
Is there any by state, or is there any part?
See if we can find a happiness map for U.S. states.
I'd be surprised on that because we're just all kind of blue.
Canada's happier than us. That's not surprising.
Yeah. I just saw something that the Americans are now more polite than the Canadians. So Canada has nothing. See that? That was hilarious.
So Canadians are more direct.
No, they're just more not like, you know, because the joke is you know, Canadians are unusually polite.
Yeah.
But actually that's not that case anymore.
There we go. Okay, so
Lighter colors are better. West Virginia.
So wait a minute.
Wait,
No, I think the darkest colors, the red. So Hawaii's the happiest in Utah.
Alaska
Top
is
is
extremely
white.
low. That's interesting.
Well, I mean, Hawaii, like
I would hope.
Utah's pretty bitching. I mean, have you ever been to Zion National Forest?
Yeah.
Montana's interesting.
Well, it's interesting. Not to be political, a little political spin to that. All of the kind of purple states are orange, like right in the middle, orange, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is something about the mountains in the ocean.
Yeah.
I need one. Here in Austin, we don't we just don't have it.
Yeah, no, it's a huge problem. That's why I realize Austin will not be my final resting place.
No.
Because I either need to see like a big peak or a wave break.
Did I ever tell you before I went to Everest, which again, you talk about nature, Chris, like that was the most spiritual mental reset I needed. But I took my wife to Coeur d'Alene, found a house that overlooked Fernan Lake and Coeur d'Alene Lake, and put an offer on it. And this is just what I needed. You know, it had the mountains, it has a lake.
Yeah.
I'm good. And I'm like, hey, you're gonna have to put an offer in when they counter. I don't know what my Wi-Fi situation is going to be in Nepal, probably non-existent. And I got back and I'm like, hey, what happened? Did we get the house? She's like, no, we didn't get the house. I called the real estate agent. She's like, oh yeah, I was trying to reach your wife. You just never get an answer. She didn't want to move outside of Austin because her whole family's here.
Yeah.
But she also considers Montana part of Canada just based off the weather. But my brothers in Whitefish,
Yeah.
you talking about the generation. Those are the most active kids. They're doing taekwondo during the afternoons. If it's snow season, they're either
ski.
on they're skiing, doing flips off of tricks. And then, they're also racing snowmobiles around and just active, happy family. Well, I think we've got a few questions. One is how to fight PTSD flashes during the daytime. I've never heard of PTSD flashes, but he said, it seems that I live in the past and present at the same time. Chris, have you heard that before?
No, I have not. So I don't have a good answer to the question, but then I would wonder, usually if you're trying not to experience something or not to do something, you have to fill that, you have to replace that with doing something different. So I without knowing a whole lot more, I really couldn't answer that question. But sometimes people say, well, I want to stop, I don't know, chewing my nails. So, okay, fine. There's a way to do that. Not that this is a good analogy or even a fair analogy, but if you want to stop chewing your nails, you got to find something else to do with your hands, with your time. And so, we used to Kojak when I was a kid watching Kojak. He was stopped. He was going to quit smoking. So,
Suckers.
so he got
Suckers.
volleyball.
Telly Savalas.
Telly Savalas, yeah. And what was
and I don't want to
the
make
TV
light of the question. I don't want to make light of this question. So
well, wasn't it the
maybe
Dalai
my
Lama?
answer takes us a little bit off the path, but
The
that
Dalai
might be
Lama's in a
yeah.
little bit of heat
Well,
right now.
no, well, maybe not this llama, maybe one of the other llamas.
Okay.
But didn't he say when they asked him what he found was most confusing about man? But well, let's not talk about the llama. But what is
let
it?
Chris answer his question.
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, we just had another question was, what is the linkage between mental and physical health? I think we've hit
Right.
that. In my personal belief that you can't be physically unsound. Obese. If you're obese, you can't look anyone in the eye honestly and say, yes, I'm happy. I just think you can lie to yourself. You can't lie to me. When I've been at my,
Are you fat shaming?
I'm not fat shaming. This is not fat shaming. When I got wounded,
Is fat shaming really a problem?
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
like,
yes.
I don't
no,
think.
but I mean,
Well,
I
it's-
don't.
it's-
It
it's-
should-
it's-
it
they're
shouldn't
saying
be.
It's a societal issue.
It
Well,
shouldn't be.
But I mean, isn't shame a powerful motivator?
It
I
is.
know. I know. For
Oh,
me,
yeah.
shame is a huge motivator.
That's how they've always
Like that's
controlled.
basically what woke me up every single morning to go train and study and do everything was because what if you fail? What if you don't do well? What if the people that have depended on you and expect you to do something, you let them down? Like there's people that are expecting greatness, whether it be your parents or those people around you that are invested, that like you owe them something. Like I don't.
Well, that's how, I mean, you think about like tribes and clans before they had laws, they didn't have like a legal system, but shame was a huge
Social
way.
norms.
Yeah. Social
Yeah.
norms, like shame. That's the reason people are so afraid of public speaking. Like it's an irrational fear. Most people can't say what they're afraid of. But if you walked into your village, your clan, and everybody there was staring at you, you did something wrong. And if you get thrown out of that, you die because nobody can survive on their own. Right.
Sure.
So so that's a tantamount to death to have everybody staring at you. Well, I don't know if that's actually, defended, but I've heard that many times.
We
That-
talked about it in the book is most of the things that cause people from stepping into the arena are not internal fear factors, but external fear factors, the fear of being judged,
Yeah.
Especially in this day and age with social media. Again, you do something, it makes the front page, it ends up as a meme, it ends up on social media, and you see the countless, what we call keyboard cowards just attacking you. And I
Well,
think
and if you
that
get
prevents
any
people.
criticism, because everybody on social media, as Chris was saying, like everybody's promotion of themselves is they have a perfect life. Like, hey, I'm in great shape. I'm energetic all the time. I'm happy all the time. I'm well groomed all the time. My mood's up all the time. And if you ever get any feedback to you that says there's something non-ideal about you, you're like, well, that's who you're comparing yourself, instead of being in your group with your buddies and knowing all their flaws too, and knowing that you're pretty much just like everyone else.
Is there and I mean maybe Doc knows on this side, but is it like I don't really understand the obsession with caring what a whole bunch of people that don't know you like shouldn't people I mean I'm saying like I don't know if it's a rhetorical question, but like I like fans hated us when I played football. Those fans didn't know me.
Yeah.
And like, so like I just like, it's not that I like value their opinion in any way because they're
Right.
fans. So like, I can't understand like on social media, like somebody disagrees with us. I don't know this person. They don't know me. And like, all they're seeing is one snapshot. Like, how would I base my self-worth on a whole bunch of people that don't know me?
Yeah. I don't know where that comes from.
Like,
Because why
that's
would
got-
you take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from?
Well, like if
And
you
if you
call
don't
me
know
on
him,
the
you're not going
phone-
to take advice from him.
But from
I
an
mean,
outside
or-
perspective, I love watching Twitter and just the comments go back and forth.
Well,
I do
no,
get enjoyed.
but like if
It's
if
like
I-
watching a train wreck.
If I'm
Yeah.
fucking up and Doc calls me, he's like, "Hey, dude, you're fucking up." Or if I'm calling him this, well, he knows me and he knows that I'm fucking up, and I take that to heart. Somebody on the internet that I don't know that says that, I'd be like, fuck off.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't do any value for me, and I've never understood people's desire to please a whole bunch of people that they don't know, and more importantly, people that are probably so wrapped up in their own lives that they can't even like invest the emotional currency to even figure out what the fuck is going on. Right. Like I'm convinced that everybody is just walking around in like a glass box of emotion, hoping that nobody notices. Right. Like that's really what it comes down to. And then like it gets shattered so easily. And I'm like, really, this is how fucking fragile we are, that somebody on the internet on a magical little device says something bad and this fucking sends you into a deal. Holy shit. What has happened to our society?
I think that goes to when you're raising kids is, take a lesson from stoicism. You can't affect what other people think.
Yeah.
You can only control yourself,
Yeah.
do what you can for yourself, moving forward. But likability is something I just don't care about. Like I know who I am. I know what I stand for. Yes, I know.
People that are assholes always say that.
I've got a shirt now that says, I'm not for everyone. And Jordan hates
Dude,
it. But
not everybody likes vanilla ice cream.
No,
Like,
no.
I'm fine with it.
let me, and just to sort of put a pin in that one, when I got wounded, I went from about 190 to 225 because they were pulling shrapnel out of my legs they were debreeding me for like 6 months. So my diet went to shame, and that's a lack of discipline. And I couldn't even really run or do anything. So I got up to about 220, and it was the worst weight I've ever held. And I can tell you that is when my mental health hit the shitters. I mean, it was just at the lowest. When I started to get active again, just looking at myself in the mirror, it was just,
I think there's a social shift around that too, though, because like,
no, the dad bod is not. No woman
no,
can,
no,
can
no,
look.
I'm
and
not
say,
talking about women, but like I hang around. So John knows my son. My son played football at UC Irvine, and he, and I've coached his football leagues, and so after
Sacramento.
No, UC Irvine.
Cole? Is it Irvine?
Cole's at Irvine, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. He's UC Irvine.
It's the world's worst father.
To Orange County?
Your son goes to UC Sacramento.
It's a little different area.
He didn't go to Sacramento?
No. What am I thinking of? Not Irvine. Harper goes to Irvine.
Yeah.
Next episode will be about Alzheimer's.
UC Sacramento.
Dementia.
No.
It's,
It's
happening
not Sacramento.
live.
It's
UC Davis in Sacramento.
UC Davis. That's what it is. Davis.
Hey,
Anyway,
throwing me for a loop. I'm
My
like,
nephew just signed with them.
Anyway.
I'm like, you're throwing me for a loop.
Anyway.
Good job, Dad.
Davis is in Sacramento.
Yes.
I don't care about California schools. So anyway, I hang around him and all of his friends. They're all athletes. Like they're all, college athletes, and all of them are doughy. Like,
yeah,
all of them. Like I'm leaner than any of them. I'm in my 50s. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, they don't consider that fat though. Like you can be 30 pounds overweight. If you're 300 pounds and you're 30 pounds overweight, they're like, yeah,
we whipped Cole into fucking shape when he came to train with us.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, dude, he literally how much weight did he lose? He lost what, like 30 pounds?
35 pounds.
Yeah. And like completely recomped everything about him. Like
he went from 305 to 270.
Yeah. And was moving better, looked amazing. Like just the transformation that kid was anything short of fantastic.
Well, guys, we'll go around the table. Last thoughts. Chris, we'll end with you. John?
Man, I am as a parent, and I hate to say, like, I'm so nervous about the future in this. Like, I can only control my ecosystem, those people that I touch, and whether it be the people within the power athlete community or the fighters and train, and like, we're kind of like in this weird kind of like fight kind of deal here in Austin. It's a really neat community, but like I look at my kids and the fact that we were in California and I didn't like the life we were leading, so we pulled the ripcord, got to Austin, came out, bought a bunch of land, we lived next door, a bunch of horses, like basically created the life that we wanted. We had the opportunity to do it, but I think so many times, if only I were this, well, if only it's going to go away. So if you're unhappy with something, make a change, and we did, and I think it's been for the better. But I think, things like community, things like having friends and being able to do different stuff. I just think we become so isolated with social media and work and all these other things that work from home and you're like, okay, great. So I'm just going to get up and no day's going to be different. I'm going to get up and work in my pajamas. And like, how does my life change? And like the fact that people don't want to go into an office and do this is a little surprising to me. But I think we can only invoke change with those of which we trust. So be a good mentor, hopefully talk to people. And the one thing that I've really taken the mantle on recently, which is just mentoring young athletes.
Yeah.
I had a dad call me the other day, son's a junior in high school, got connected through somebody, offensive line getting recruited. And he's like, hey, can he come over and hang out with you for a little bit? I'm like, yeah, bring him over on Saturday. We're going to train. I want to introduce him to some of the fighter kids and, create community, be like a conduit, help people. don't be such a fucking asshole all the time. You know, like you realize that like younger people need mentorship and we have something to offer them. I'm just amazed with like how like these kids yeah. I mean, I think we can do so much better. And I'm just surprised that people aren't willing to do better.
Set the example.
Yeah.
It's the highest form of observational
Be the
learning,
change you
behavioral
wanna
modeling.
do, dude.
Yep.
Be the change that you want to see in this world.
Sean, and if you say jujitsu, I'm going to leave it across the
Yeah,
tip.
I'm
It's
not gonna
jujitsu.
say
That's
jiu-jitsu.
soft.
No. I think that it's more like what people typically need the most is often found where they're least likely to look. And there's a lot of things that people can do that are way out of their comfort zone that'll really help them if they just, start almost like there's a new craft revolution of people like making things that are old fashioned. Maybe that would be good for people to do with their life in general, looking for like going back in time, different, old school relationships, meeting face to face, not on the computer, doing hard sports, doing challenging activities, eating healthy. I think that would be a good place to start.
Do you think people should do it incrementally? Like dip your toe in, dip 2 toes in? Or just,
Yeah. And I think one would help the other. I think if you start doing, if you start eating healthier, you might feel better. Then you might exercise a little bit. Then you feel better about that. You might start dating again. You might get out of your house. You might, I think it definitely happens that way. I don't think it's usually people just do that.
They leap.
But usually it's like they find an activity. Like if someone starts doing a new activity that's difficult and they enjoy it, maybe they're surfing and they love surfing, and that makes them eat better because they don't want to feel lousy when they're on the waves, and and then things just start building. But one positive sport that they enjoy doing might be like a chain, right? And then who knows?
But you look at boxing, like somebody picks up boxing right away, they're gonna be like, "This sucks. Those workouts suck."
Yeah, but the thing is if the thing with working out to work out that's tough is it takes a while to get the physical benefits. But if you get better at throwing a jab, then you're improving every day. So you have that measure that you're getting better at a sport every day. And then you're physically starting to feel better at the same time. Instead of like, if you're just running every morning by yourself, it's just going to be brutal for a while until you get that physical. It's hard, it's hard to have, there's no game that you're improving in when you're running, but if you're playing soccer, you might get better at soccer. So that's good. You're improving, you're getting a little faster, you're understanding. I don't know. So I think that there's doing a sport is going to be, a good way to go.
I always say just give it 30 days. Like the first few boxing workouts are going to, the first week is going to suck, but 30 days, you're like, wait a second, I'm seeing the difference.
For sure.
That's a long time to grind. 30 days if someone's depressed. I mean, I think, along with the purpose of the, podcast, I don't know how much help we offered folks, but, I think a lot of things get overcomplicated. And, I talk about this with sleep. I talk about it with nutrition, and talk about it with exercise and stress mitigation, and just how much lifestyle matters. And lifestyle is the key to everything. And there's so many books that argue different pros and cons of different behaviors. We just have to go back to evolutionary biology, evolutionary medicine. Just go back a few hundred years and just think about, how did my ancestors live? What did they eat? You didn't have the option of laying around all day. You didn't have distraction all day. You had to get up and do things. You had community. You didn't eat Twinkies and donuts because that stuff didn't exist. And you were active. You had to be active. You didn't have cars. You didn't have electricity. So not that you have to go back and live that way, but if you can just start with, you can start without, you don't need any expertise. You don't need any new knowledge. Just start and think about, okay, what would people have done 200 years ago? And just start, sleeping that way and trying to move that way and trying to be more active. And it's a small thing. It gets rid of a lot of the cognitive dissonance that's involved with trying to learn about some new plan. And then, for the veterans out there and the families and friends of veterans out there, if you aren't willing to ask for help, just go hang out with somebody. Just go be around some people. And if you think that a vet who's struggling, even if they don't tell you they're struggling, go spend some time with him or her. Go do some things, give them a call, whatever. Because sometimes it takes such a small bit of encouragement to change, the entire path of somebody's life, because it just opens them up to one more idea and one more opportunity and one more thought. And then, a year down the road, they can, they're a totally different person. And maybe now they're a mentor. They're an elder who can help other guys through. So everyone we save probably, puts out one mentor that'll save a couple more,
Exponential. Now, for me, I think it's just foundational, building blocks, positive habits that you build If you've done damage to your body for 5 years, guess what? You're not going to get in shape within a year. It's going to take a little while.
You mean 6 weeks? I can't get in shape.
Well, yes, you can. You're going to lose weight. But if you're 275 pounds when you should be at 175, it's going to take a while. You just got to commit. You got to have a sense of purpose. And then tribe. I think that was the common theme. I mean, especially with you talking about jujitsu and how it becomes a tribe. My identity, my DNA is with the tribe. It always has been, always will be. And the great thing about the tribe too is, you get pulse checks from everyone. Like, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, hey, I'm good, man. I'm not gonna do something drastic.
You're not in your room brushing your teeth with a 45.
Yeah, no.
Looking it around.
But it also just if you're struggling, that's not weak. That's just human. And reach out and get some help.
We've all been there, man.
Yeah.
Chris,
We've all been there.
the expert.
Well, I'd say I'm in a panel of experts because you guys have pretty much said it all just now. I would say, from a lifestyle perspective, get a book on anti-inflammatory lifestyles and live it. That's about sleep, exercise, and diet. And Kirk nailed it. It's really about how did our ancestors live from an evolutionary, biological, and psychological perspective, and try to get some of that. And then it's social connection, tribe. We've lost a lot of our connection in our society. One way to kind of engage that is to get out and do some altruistic, volunteer, mentor, help others. And that's one of the best things any of us can do for ourselves, actually. And then, of course, meaning and purpose. And I always like to say meaning and purpose, including an earned success. We have to earn the success we want, or it won't have meaning for us.
Beautiful.
And then treatment wise, yes, ask for help if you need it. And there are treatments out there. And just because one treatment doesn't help you, there are so many options. There's so many different possibilities. How many SSRIs are there? I can't even count the number now. I've lost track. It's like a lot. How many different therapies are there? How many different alternative therapies are out there? And John talked about equine horse farms and things like that. There's just so many things out there. So keep looking, keep pushing.
And I love that you said, Chris. One of my favorite things when I'm working with somebody who's really struggling is I get them to help somebody else. I set them up with somebody who's like, who could really use your guidance on this, and it's not artificial. It's like, it's a serious thing. It's like, hey, I know you're really good at this, and this guy's struggling with that. Can you go help him? And that'll pull people out faster than anything. That now they have a purpose, and they have a sense of value, a sense of purpose, a sense of self-worth, and everybody grows from helping other people.
It's like assigning a dog to somebody who's depressed. It creates a bond.
Yeah. I mean, I like the mentorship is really fascinating to me. Like, because there's so much like coaching and all this stuff online. I'm like, you have to like sit there and talk to a person and actually like kind of help them on their path, and to see like people grow as like you come into their life is really pretty powerful. I mean, we see it with our kids, but they grow as they just get bigger, and then they start developing personalities. But it's interesting to see because people come to you and like to see them grow into who they are. It's pretty neat, man. I kind of had lost that in my life a little bit, and then these guys got thrust upon me a little bit, and they've really kind of like to see how far they've come in a short amount of time is pretty exciting. And now I have ownership, and like there's like a sense of pride in who they are. And like almost like pushing them and being like, as you guys go out into the world and you go out and you slay your dragons, like know that there's people behind you that help prop you up. Like you owe it. Like I know this sounds cheesy, but playing in the NFL, the fact that my name was on my back, I think I maybe heard me talk about this, was like extremely impactful for me, because that's my dad's name, my brother's name.
Yeah.
Like my wife's like, that's our name. And I knew that when I was going out there, that name meant something, because bunch of dipshits drinking, having fun would see that name, and whether or not you did it, but like there was a sense of ownership that like my name on my back represented more than just me. Like I remember we were playing the NFC Championship game, and I didn't even know this. All of a sudden we're on the field walking off, and I see my cousin come walking towards me, and I'm like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "Oh, I'm one of the riggers." Like he worked at a company that did all the lighting rigging and all this. He's like, "Yeah, no, I'm doing all the rigging." And he's like, "I've been bragging on you all the time." And I like met all of his buddies, and all these dudes came over, and they were like so stoked that like his cousin was actually playing in the game that they were working. So they'd never met any of the players. And like, he's like, dude, like we have the same last name. And I was like, dude, that's a big deal, right? And I just think like realizing that you're just a piece in a larger family and like a larger group of people. And like, you know, family doesn't have to be blood. You bring people in and adopt them and it's kind of whole deal. But like, there's a sense of ownership. I mean, Sean, you train people and you see them grow and you're like, dude, you've come so far. Like, I feel like I'm like a piece in this deal. Like, you fucking owe me this. Like, you know, I've invested in you. Now go out and be fucking great.
Yeah, definitely.
Guys, we appreciate it. Again, Dr. Chris Frueh, thank you for your time, your expertise. And for everyone listening, we will see you next time. Thanks.